welcome back to my channel and welcome back to day 5, hopefully, if I am uploading in the order that I plan to, of palette week. Today I'm going to be doing an update to the palette tag that I did last year. This tag was originally created and done in collaboration with Samantha and Allie Glines, and then it blew up and tons of people were doing this. People were adding their own questions, etc. So I rewatched my old video to get the questions, and then I watched a bunch of other people's videos to kind of gather extra questions to put into this tag based all around my palettes and my palette collection. So I have 27 different questions all about my palette collection to answer for you guys today. So if you're interested in hearing about my least favorite palettes, my favorite palettes, overrated, underrated, affordable, non-affordable, worst packaging, best packaging, all of the things, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or you just like chit-chatting about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's just get into the video. Okay guys, I will have Samantha and Allie's video linked down below. Like I said, I have tons of other questions that I've gathered as well. But let's start with question number 1, and that is going to be my newest palette. And I actually have 2 palettes that I bought together that are my newest, and they are these 2 newest cutie palettes from Nabla. I am such a fan of Nabla Cosmetics in general. I have raved about them all year, so I was super excited to pick up the 2 newest cutie palettes. 2 newest cutie palettes to the cutie collection line. So we have the analog palette, which is this guy right here. Really beautiful and sultry. I love the Nabla formula. I think it is outstanding. They have so many different textures. Just highly recommend. And then also the Midnight palette, which looks like this. I have not yet played around with the Midnight palette, but it looks so beautiful. And I have been loving a pop of blue on the eyes, so I'm really excited to dive into this one. Next up, we have my oldest palette, and I'm almost 100% confident my oldest palette at this point is my ABH Modern Renaissance palette. Mine's super dirty, super crusty, super old. I have some pans in this. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of over this palette. I do plan to do an updated palette collection and declutter, and I think I might end up decluttering this. I'm really close to hitting pan on a couple of shades, which is kind of why I've kept this palette around. Maybe I would end up depotting a few of the shades. I'm considering decluttering some of my palettes and then depotting them and just keeping the singles that I want from the palette. But I'm just kind of over this not color story, but I don't use this half of the palette, and I just really don't get excited or inspired to reach for this palette anymore. So this is my oldest palette in my collection. Question number 3 is my most expensive, and I have 2 ways to answer this. So the most expensive in terms of dollar value are my Natasha Denona $129 palettes, and I have 4 of them. I have most recently the Circle Loco palette, which I'm not gonna lie I kind of regret buying this, but that's okay. It is what it is. Then I have probably my favorite, I think, of the $129 palettes. I have the Gold palette, just such a stunning and beautiful palette. My first ever Natasha Denona palette to my collection was the Lila palette. Also so beautiful. And then last year I added Biba to my collection as well. I have not reached for this palette enough. So in terms of actual dollar value, cost up front, those are my most expensive, but then I also wanted to toss this guy in. And this is this is my only Tom Ford quad. This, you get 4 shadows for $88. Now I'm not sure in terms of price per ounce or gram or whatever, if this is actually the most expensive or not, but $88 for 4 shades is quite a hefty price tag. So I just wanted to throw that one in there as well. So then question number 4 is my most affordable in my collection, and I included quads. I kind of include quads in just my palette collection in general. When I think of my palettes, I also think of my quads. So my least expensive or most affordable in my collection are my ColourPop quads, and I am a huge fan of these. I picked these up this year when they released. My favorite is this one right here, which is in the shade Creamsicle. It's just a really beautiful coral quad. But I also have Sorbet, which is a really beautiful mauve toned palette. This shade came broken and I had to repress it and it got a little bit messy. And then I have this beautiful brown toned one as well, neutral one in the shade Sparkler. All of them are really nice, really good quality, very easy to just pop in a bag, but potentially not the most durable. I have not taken these traveling with me. Maybe I took one with me, I can't remember. I think I did take this one with me to Florida. This is beside the point. These are my most affordable in my collection. Question number 5 is an everyday eyeshadow palette, and I have quite a few everyday eyeshadow palettes in my collection that I could have put in for this response, but I also wanted to have like a different palette for each response. I wanted to try and not have any repeats. So one of my everyday eyeshadow palettes in my collection, I think this is a really good everyday eyeshadow palette, is the Too Faced Born This Way Natural Nudes eyeshadow palette. This is what this one looks like, and I love this palette because you get kind of a range of things you can do with this palette. You have your neutrals, you have like your mauve pinks if you want to do a mauve pink look, and then you also have like your deeper warm browns if you want to go a more sultry route. So you really do have a lot of options with this palette, and I'm so happy to have this in my collection. Oftentimes, if there's a day where I'm like kind of in a hurry and I can't decide, there's some mornings where I like hem and haw over what eyeshadow palette I want to use, and then I just end up reaching for this because I need to get out the door, and this is super easy for me to just create an everyday look. Question number 6 is my most colorful eyeshadow palette. I had a few options to choose from for this answer, but like I said, I didn't want to do any repeats, so I chose one of my most colorful, and it is the Glamlite Cake palette. And this is what she looks like. She is so beautiful. The mattes and the shimmers in this palette have really impressed me. Sometimes I get really nervous when playing with color because I am not the best blender. I'm not the most patient person, so colorful mattes sometimes just are not my thing. But the Glamlite formula has been really easy to work with, and the shimmers are so stinking beautiful and outstanding. So I've been a huge fan of the Glamlite, the times that I've used my Glamlite palettes thus far this year. Question number 7 is my smallest palette in my collection, and I have a few options for this answer. I have my Natasha Denona minis. I have a few of them, which these are pretty small, but you do get a lot of product. Like the pants are actually pretty deep. Also my ColourPop quads, pretty small, and then also my Rowan quads. Like, they're larger than the ColourPop quad, but in terms of like actual product inside, I don't really know. I just, you know, I wanted to share as many of my palettes as possible with you guys in this video, so that's why I'm sharing so many things. For my largest palette in my collection, it has to go to this guy right here. This is the Be Perfect Carnival palette. This is one of the palettes I've had since the beginning of the year, and I have not tried this yet. Oopsies. But nonetheless, it is one of the largest palettes in my collection. This also definitely would have fit for like most colorful. It has tons of color to it, but it also has like neutrals to it as well, so it's still approachable in a sense, if you will. But I need to get around to trying this, obviously. Next question is palette with the best memory attached to it, and I'm not sure actually what I said last year, but I have a new answer this year, and not necessarily, okay, this isn't like a best memory, but it's a very fond memory. One of my best memories, I guess. So my family, because of me probably, I'm a very spur of the moment person. Like, I could get home from work on a Friday and have a 4-day weekend and be like, dear, let's drive to Tennessee. Definitely done that. So let me just like lay the land for you guys. It is mid-March, I believe. We're still in the thick of COVID. Things are still closed down. Life is, I don't want to offend anyone, but like life is so boring. Like, I am not the type of person, like sitting inside the house truly just like drains my soul from my body. So it's mid-March. It's cold in Minnesota. We're in the thick of COVID. The Chauvin trial is going on, and my husband and I literally, like, if we both worked that day, we would like get home from work and then we would watch the entire day's worth of the trial. So unhealthy to be so glued to it. So anyway, very like depressing atmosphere. So my husband and I are sitting there. He ended up like, I don't remember what happened, but he ended up like getting a 4 or 5 day weekend that like we weren't expecting him to have a 4 or 5 day weekend, and I had a week off of work, and we kind of like looked at each other and we were like, should we just like pack up our bags and go somewhere tomorrow? So we ended up taking a 10-hour road trip down to Black Hills, South Dakota, and the weather actually ended up being pretty decent. I remember we were outside and I was wearing like long sleeves. This is the longest story ever to say that this is the palette I brought with me. And so I have very good memories attached to this palette. I had just received this palette in the mail like the day before we left, I believe. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna bring this with me so that I can test it out and get a review up. Never got a review up because it was about that time of the year as well that I just really lost all motivation to keep up with my channel in a good amount, like in a timely time frame. Like I stopped doing my monthly palette rankings, etc. Promise, this definitely has good memories attached to it. I love this palette. I believe my ColourPop ranking video just went up yesterday or a couple days ago, and this palette ranked very highly and it has a great memory attached to it. Question number 10 is a palette that is worth the hype, and I don't necessarily know that this palette is like the most hyped palette, but I feel like Huda Beauty in general in terms of eyeshadow is very hyped, so I selected the Huda Mercury Retrograde palette. We all know I love this palette. We all know I say that like I'm the mascot of Mercury Retrograde. I love to live my life in chaos. I thrive in chaos. And I just think this palette is absolutely beautiful. It's so fun because you can do neutral looks with this, but you can have so much fun with the different tones and textures in this palette as well. I'm a huge fan of this. If I lost this, I would repurchase it at the full price. Like, I'm just such a huge fan. So had to recommend that one. And then for not worth the hype, I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, and I'm not gonna lie, they're releasing a new quad that I do still want to purchase even though I don't think they're worth the hype. Can you guess? The Charlotte Tilbury quads. I think this is a nice palette. So this is Exaggerize. I also have Pop of Pillow Pop Talks. I don't know, the Pop of Pillows. It's not Pop of Pillows. Palette of Pops. I just, for $53, like, it's nice, but the packaging is super cheap. I was really disappointed in the packaging because it's just so light and just like, meh. I was like, okay. The one matte shade blends super easily, and I can create a very easy, work appropriate look with this. It's a very easy palette to use, but I just don't feel like it's like worth $53 personally. Okay, moving on. All right, I have a visitor joining us for the rest of the video. She's home with me for the week, and she's gonna be quiet while I just share the rest of my answers with you guys. So next up, we have a palette from my favorite brand. And I'm cheating and including two palettes because there's a palette I want to talk about, but I feel like it doesn't really have another place here. But then there's like my actual answer to this palette. So, a palette from my favorite brand. I have been raving about Nabla on my channel all year. I love Nabla Cosmetics. So my original answer for this is just the Nabla Side by Side. If you were to start with any palette from Nabla, I would recommend the Side by Side just because I feel like you're getting a nice neutral palette with some pops of just fun shades that you can kind of play around with. So like Body and Soul as well as Magic Moment have just like, they have like a fun flip to them, but overall this is a really neutral palette. I also feel like it offers a good range of the tones and textures that Nabla has to offer. They have a wide range of formulas. It's not just like a matte and a shimmer. So if I were to recommend one palette from Nabla, it would be to start with the Side by Side. I pretty much love every palette I've tried from Nabla with the exception of, is it like the Garden one that has like the blue shade? That one I decluttered, but other than that, I've loved every Nabla palette that I've tried. And I also just wanted to give a shout out to the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes. Most recently, I've been trying the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze, and I just think Artist Couture knocks it out of the park with these two like Supreme palettes. I can't really speak to any of his other palettes, but the two that come in the packaging like this, super sleek packaging, really nice. Such good quality and really will just work for like a range of skin tones and a range of occasions. Just, it's so good. So I wanted to just give this like a special shout out. Next up, we have my most used palette, and by far my most used palette this year has been the Natasha Denona Mini Nude. I hit 2 pans in this palette this year. Let's see if I can get it to focus. There are the 2 pans. This is a palette that I reach for every single time we've had like a summer event or a date night. We go out every single Saturday to the same restaurant on the lake. I love it. It's like our jam. It's our Saturday thing. My husband's obsessed with cars, and every Saturday they have this thing by our house where like everybody drives their like cars. There's cool cars. I'm not a car person at all, but they drive their cars up and down like this like strip of road. So we go driving on that strip every Saturday, and then we go out to dinner, and it's like our thing. And I wear this palette every single Saturday. This is also a palette I wear all the time to work, and this is like my sweatpants palette. Like if I just want to be comfortable with my eyeshadow and my makeup, this is my go-to palette. Next up, we have a palette that surprised me, and for this I went with the Sugar Pill palette. This is the Fun Size palette. So when this first released, I was like, yep, nope, skipping that, definitely not for me. But then I think it was Mariella who had this in a Shop My Stash or something and was just talking about how it's such a fun, cute palette. And last year was a year that I really wanted to like dabble in color, and I just loved the color story of this, that it was like brights, but like pastel brights in a way, just like, I don't know, there's something about this palette that just really spoke to me. I love that it's a smaller, I love a smaller palette. Like a 9-pan palette is truly like my perfect size. And yeah, this one definitely just caught me by surprise. I was thinking of a dirty joke in my head. Smaller palettes I like, but other things I don't like as small. Just had to throw that dirty joke out in front of my daughter. Mom of the year right here. All right, next up is a palette that I wasn't going to buy, and I can say with full certainty that I had no intentions of buying the Glamlight Ice Cream palette. In fact, when my sister was asking me for recommendations for Christmas presents last year, I told her I wanted to try Glamlight, but I specifically said I wanted to try the Glamlight Cake palette, which is the palette she got me, and the donut palette. Hannah, you're the best. Thank you so much. And then this was in everybody's favorites video, and I was like, what? Like, okay, like clearly I also need to try this one. Everyone was raving about the pastels in here, and this is another palette I could have also mentioned as a most colorful. This is beautiful, and I haven't dug into every shade in this, but I will say the mattes that I have used in this, I don't know if I've used any shimmers in this palette yet, and I've only used a handful of the mattes, but the mattes that I've used have performed so well. Like, I'm so blown away. And even though I don't own every palette from Glamlight, obviously, and sometimes their color stories just like don't speak to me, I'm still very interested in everything the brand has to release now, but definitely did not intend to pick this up, but so happy to have this in my collection now. Next question is a palette I love but never reach for, and for that I have to go with my Natasha Denona Gold. I only reach for this on like the most special of special occasions, like my husband's birthday, my daughter's birthday. Like it's a special occasion when I reach for this, and it's like, why is that? Because one, this cost me an arm and a leg. Two, it's so beautiful for literally any and every occasion. Three, there is so much product in the actual eyeshadows. I do have pan on one shadow in here, but like still, this will take me years to go, like years to even finish up one eyeshadow, I swear. It's such a good, like when I first saw this, I was like, also not gonna buy this because I was like, every brown looks the same. But when you look at this in person, you can tell there is a very distinct difference between each of the brown mattes. I absolutely adore the green shimmers and this gold. Like it's just, it's such a beautiful palette. I really do need to reach for this more. Next up is my biggest regret, and I kind of mentioned this already, but I do regret purchasing the Natasha Denona Circo Loco. So when this first released, I definitely did a double take. I was like, that's so pretty. But then pretty quickly I was like, girlfriend, you're never gonna use that. It's one of the, like, if this was one of the $65 midi palettes, maybe I could have reasoned with it a little bit more. But I was like, it's a very colorful palette that you aren't gonna ever wear to work. You're never gonna get through it. The shades are so large. But then alas, the Sephora VIB sale, this was available on the Sephora website, and the rest is history. I'm not that impressed with this palette in terms of the mattes. I don't find the mattes that easy to work with, and I find them to be really patchy. The first day I tested this out, I did like a pink look, and I was filming a video, and I remember being like, I really like the look I created today. And then I was like looking in the mirror to make sure, and I was like, wait a minute, literally my eyeshadow had worn away. It almost was like my crease had like been sweating, and I just didn't have eyeshadow there. So like if I look down, there was like a strip where I didn't even have eyeshadow. If I still can find the photo I took, I'll post it right here so you can see. But I just have not been that impressed with the mattes. I've recently been like looking up different tutorials that I can try and play around with this palette a little bit, just because I'm also not the most creatively attuned person when it comes to, I don't even know if that was grammatically correct. I actually am a very creative person in a very unique and weird way, but when it comes to creating eyeshadow looks, that's not where I thrive in terms of creativity. So looking at this, I get super like stressed out, like I don't know what to do. So I do need to play around with this a little bit more. The shimmers that I've used I think are really beautiful, but I should not have bought this. And this is probably the palette that I regret in my collection the most in terms of purchases. Next question is best packaging, and yet again I'm cheating and I have 2 answers. So in terms of like luxe feel, I obviously had to give it to Pat McGrath. Pat also comes out with the most beautiful outer packaging, but what's annoying about that is like you take it off and like this is just like a sleek black. Very heavy, very weighty, beautiful packaging. So I wanted to like give that a shout out, but in terms of like just creativity around the packaging and just really tying into like the theme of the palette, I have to give it to Lunar Beauty. Like I have been so impressed with Lunar Beauty this year. So I have 3 of the Lunar Beauty palettes. First up, I have the Greek Goddess. I just think this is stunning. This is raised, which normally would annoy me, but it just adds a little bit something extra to the palette. And I think it's beautiful. I also have the Eternal Eclipse. Again, the moon on this is raised, and I just think like Manny knocked it out of the park with the packaging. And then I also have the Moon Spell, which looks like a Moon Spell book. Like I just feel like you cannot get more creative than that. So I have to give it to Lunar Beauty with their packaging. I think they really kill it. Next up is worst packaging, and I had to do a repeat answer for this because I had to put this for worst packaging. Clearly I have a thing against this product. I'm chucking the product, but the Charlotte Tilbury quads, like literally you'd think if you're paying $53, could you give a little bit, like, could they just be a little bit weightier even? Could they? The new palette that has the stars on the outside, it looks so pretty, and I'm sure it's gonna feel just cheap AF as well, super light. But I do really want that one. But Charlotte Tilbury, like, come on, let's step the game up a little bit. Okay, next question is the brand that you own the most palettes from. My answer is ColourPop. I do own actually 20 palettes from ColourPop. I totally forgot to rank my Stone Cold Fox palette with my ColourPop palettes, but I wanted to give a special shout out to the other 2 because I have to cheat. Natasha Denona I own 10 from, and then Nabla I own 10 from. So Natasha Denona, I don't have everything in front of me. I own 5 of their minis, 2 of their middies, and then 4, that's 11 actually, 4 of their large palettes. And then from Nabla, I had to shout Nabla out because it's my favorite brand. I have the Side by Side. I have the Secret palette, which looks like this. This is so beautiful, but I did not reach for this enough. Then I have the Dreamy palette, which looks like this, as well as the Dreamy 2. And then I also have 6 of the Cutie palettes. I think there's 1 more Cutie palette that I need to round out my collection. So like I showed you guys earlier, I have the Analog and the Midnight, but then I also have the Metropolitan, the Wildberry.
I want to see.
There you go.
Can I sit on your lap?
The Nude. I'm almost done, honey. Okay. And the Platinum. So Nabla, Natasha Denona, ColourPop, I all own quite a lot from. And then the next the brand that I own the least amount of palettes from. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 9 brands, 8. Oh my God, you guys. 8 brands that I only own 1 palette from. So I do only own 1 Tom Ford quad, and I do think that these are a little bit astronomically priced, but I could be persuaded to purchase another one of these in the future, specifically like one of the just like very neutral browns. Probably could see myself picking up another before the end of the year. From Colored Rain, I just have the Queen of Hearts palette, an OG if you will. From Sydney Grace, I just have the collaboration with Mel Thompson, the Tiny Marvels palette. Viseart I've owned in the past. I've owned other Viseart palettes, but decluttered everything and recently gave them another chance with their Soleil La Plague palette, and I've been so impressed with this. I'm so glad that I gave them another chance because I just have been really enjoying using this palette, but I do only currently own 1 palette from Viseart. Also, Oma Beauty, I just own one palette from them. I have the Coming to America 2 palette, the Neon palette. Have not tried that one yet. From Nomad Cosmetics, I have the Iceland Fire and Ice palette, which looks like this. I like this palette. I wouldn't say I was blown away by the quality of this one. I think the mattes are nice, but I don't feel like the shimmers have a great lasting power. They're beautiful right away, but I don't feel like they last a good amount of time, or just like the most amount of time. From NARS, I recently picked up the Summer Solstice palette, and this is the only palette that I own from NARS. Been really happy with that one. And then finally from Menagerie, I have the Pastel Pup palette, but this is the only palette that I currently own from Menagerie. Very impressed with the quality of the Menagerie palette, and would definitely be interested in trying more from this brand as well. Oh my goodness, my husband is home, thank God, so he can entertain my daughter while I wrap this video up, but that means I probably won't be filming. I was gonna film another video after this, probably won't be. Rolling my eyes. Okay. The brand with the best matte formula. Was gonna give it to Natasha Denona, but I've had some inconsistencies for sure with the Natasha Denona matte formula. I'm specifically thinking of the Safari palette. Was not impressed with that palette. Purchased it and then decluttered it. And then also the Circo Loco palette. I've had some issues with the mattes as well. So I have to give it to my favorite brand, Nabla. I think they have a killer matte formula. I've never had any issues blending their mattes. I think that their mattes are beautiful, and I'm just a huge fan of the brand, a huge fan of the matte formula from Nabla. They have like a latex matte as well, which isn't my absolute favorite to work with. It's fine, but just their straight matte, so good. And then for best shimmers, like I obviously had to give it to Pat McGrath. It would be like truly rude not to. This is the Divine Rose palette. I actually have this shade on my lids today. It's a duochrome shade, but I don't know if it's pulling like duochrome on camera. But Pat McGrath, like truly foiled and shimmer, duochrome, multi-chrome, just really kills it. I get why she charges such a high price. And I do think it's worth it, I think. Next up is a brand that you want to try more from, and for me it is BH Cosmetics. So most recently I picked up the 90s Dance Remix palette, and I've been really impressed with this. For colorful like pastel shades, these are so nice, and I've never been let down by a BH Cosmetics palette that I've owned in the past. I'm very interested in just all of BH's palette releases. I think that they do release a lot, but they have some really creative and just fun releases. So I would definitely be interested in purchasing more palettes from BH in the future. For the palette that inspires me most in my collection, I had to give it to the Kaleidos Club Nebula palette in collaboration with Angie. I just think this is such a fun palette and such a unique color story in my opinion. I love the range of tones in here. I love the deep shades. I love the shimmers. And every time I reach into this palette, I create a look that I wasn't expecting to create when I reached into this initially. And still, after owning this palette for a few months now, there are so many looks that I still want to do with this palette, and I just think it's so fun. This is a palette too that I think to reach into sometimes for shimmers or just for shades to add to other looks. So definitely this is the palette that inspires me the most creatively throughout my palette collection. And then for the final question, we are actually going to wrap it up with another Kaleidos palette. The 27th question is a palette outside of your comfort zone, and for that I went with the Escape Pod. This is a colorful palette as well. What does make this palette a little bit more approachable for me is the row of shimmers I love. Sometimes I'll just do a neutral look and then reach into this palette for one of the shimmers. The shimmers are so beautiful. The Kaleidos formula is so good. I feel like too many people are sleeping on this brand because everybody should have this in their collection in my opinion. I'm being dramatic, but their formula is so easy to work with. Their mattes are incredible. Very easy to blend, very easy to work with as well. And this is another brand that everything they release I'm interested in. Most recently I picked up their Flower Punk palette. Love it. It's not a color story that is like in my comfort zone either, but I'm obsessed, and I love Kaleidos as a brand. So interested in trying more from them as well. But after that, that is going to wrap it up for today's palette tag video with a bunch of extra questions. sprinkled in. I will have all of the questions linked down below or in the description box if you guys want to answer them in the comments or post your own videos, whatever it might be. I would love to hear your answers to some of these questions down below. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video, for supporting my channel, for supporting Palette Week. Leave me your comments, let me know what other palette themed videos you would like to see from me in the future. And other than that, I will catch you guys tomorrow for another palette themed video. Bye.